So there you go. So people can go ahead and check that out if they miss it or if they have to bail a little bit early. And yeah, welcome to getting into indie animation. We have a wonderful presenter here with us today, storyboard artist and indie director Eddie Mead. He's here to give you the rundown on how the hell do you work in indie animation when the rest of the industry isn't really working out for you. Take it away, Eddie.
Okay, well, hello everybody. My name is Eddie, and I'm gonna start sharing my screen so that you can all come along with me while I start our presentation. Bree, let me know if you can see this, okay?
Yep.
Cool. So we're gonna be talking about working in indie animation a little bit today. First of all, thank you guys all for being here. I'm really excited to be able to share some of my experience today. Let's see here. Yes, okay. Just to briefly kind of go over what we're going to be covering today, we're going to be talking a little bit about the pros and cons of working in the indie space versus working in the studio space. And then we'll be talking about finding work in the indie animation space and networking. We're going to be moving on to talking about portfolio and demo reels. And then lastly, we're going to be talking about the state of indie animation, so what it kind of started as and what it's at now. And then lastly, we're going to be going over our Q&A section, which is where I'll answer any questions that I can from you guys if there's anything that pops up that you're wondering about. So first of all, what is indie animation? Indie animation really just stands for independent animation. And really all that means is it's animation that's made without a big studio backing, no big studio funding, no executives. Sometimes there is a crowdfund campaign that's behind it. So they'll do a Kickstarter or maybe some merchandise sales to promote and raise funds for their project. But often it is individually funded by someone just going to their 9-to-5 and saving up their money because they are passionate about a project. These are just a few indie projects that I'm excited about. Farfetched and Hey and Lumi are all made by good friends of mine. I also worked on the Heroes of Tomorrow, and very recently the amazing Digital Circus just came out. If you haven't seen it, I recommend it. It is a lot of fun. So let's talk about me. Hello, hi, my name is Eddie. You know that already. I've said that about twice. I'm doing this presentation today to share some of my experience working in online animation and indie animation, and to share some advice about how to get work in indie or YouTube animation spaces. I think that is something that isn't really talked about a lot. I think more often than not, advice in animation spaces is geared toward getting a job in union studios. But because of the way that the internet is working and YouTube and all these places, indie animation is becoming a lot more viable for a job. So I would like to just share some of my experience from working in this space. I'm a storyboard artist by trade. That is mostly what I do. And I'm also an indie film director. So I am directing my own indie animated film called Circus of Wishes. I started working in indie animation in about 2018 on a web series called Pencilmation. And then I started working in the animation industry at Warner Brothers in 2022. Here's some stuff that I've worked on. I've worked in both indie and studio projects. Plus, like I said, I'm directing my own little project here. I worked at the web series Hell of a Boss for 2 years. That was where I got a lot of my experience in the indie space. I also helped storyboard some of the Ramshackle animated pilot, which is coming out soon. And I have also done a lot of work for a fantasy YA animated series called Among the Others. That has been a really fun experience, and I really like the environment that was being made on that show. That is also not out yet, but if you're looking for something to check out, I recommend it. And many more. I've worked on a lot of indie projects, some things that have come out and some things that are on pause. And on the union studio side of things, I most recently worked at Warner Brothers on Harley Quinn and the Harley Quinn spinoff Kite Man as a storyboard revisionist. And I also got the opportunity to help storyboard the intro to the show Z-Way, which was a lot of fun. And it was a really fun experience that I'm very proud of. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about the pros and cons of working in studio versus working in the indie space. Let's first talk about studio animation. Some of the pros of working in a studio like Disney or Warner Brothers or DreamWorks, something that is like structured and more corporate, is probably going to be money. They will definitely pay you more than what you're going to be getting in indie. That's just the reality of it. They have a bigger studio budget. They're a big company. They have a lot of money that they can give people, and they can give you a steady paycheck while you are working on their projects, which leads me into my next point. It is a lot more steady. You clock in, you clock out, you are going to, get your paycheck every week, and it's a lot more stable. The work is also a lot more steady. In this year, it is a little more rocky than it used to be, but usually I find that studio animation has been able to give people work for several months at a time, whereas the indie space may be a little bit more touch and go. Another point of a big pro for working in studio environments is the union, which is the Animation Guild. The union helps guarantee minimum rates for your work. It helps with healthcare and benefits and protections, and it also gives you a great resource and a great community of people who can help give you advice. The union is great. I highly recommend looking into the union, because especially with all the things going on now, we all know about the strikes. We all, there's a lot going on in the entertainment industry, and educating yourself about your union is always a good idea. Another pro of studio animation is it is a well-oiled machine. It works this way, and it's been working this way for years. And so you're probably going to have one specific job that they want you to do. And they're just like, hey, do this, and then we'll send it off to the next person. And that's just how the system works. It is a lot less of building from the ground up, which indie can be a little bit rocky when people are getting started out. I have another point here of HR. HR does have a lot of valid criticisms. However, a big benefit is if you need to go talk to somebody about a higher up or another team member, having a place to go to potentially have someone intervene is a really important thing. And if you're just working online in an online community and the only HR that you have is the person who's paying you, it can be sort of a uncomfortable situation. So having HR in a studio environment is a good thing, I think. And I also think that the work, unfortunately, is taken more seriously in studio animation. So when I got my job at Harley Quinn, I had only indie experience on my resume, and for several years I had been applying to studios, and I always wondered if people looked at my resume and were like, oh, this is all indie stuff. I always was curious if that was a thing. And I think that often if I say, hey, I worked at Harley, and hey, I worked at Hell of a Boss, people are going to take my Harley work a lot more seriously, even though I'm very proud of the work that I did on both of those shows. So let's go over on the flip side to the cons of studio animation. I think there is a lot less creative input and freedom working at a big studio. More often than not, it comes down to timeline. You don't have a lot of time to mess around and be creative and explore the artistry of the thing that you want to do, because they're on a tight deadline and they need you to get X, Y, and Z done for that week, for that deadline. And you have a lot less time to give your ideas and to give your artistic spin on something versus the indie space. A huge con, I think, of studio animation is location. Most of the jobs that you're going to be seeing in a union studio, you have to be in LA or you have to be in New York. You have to be in certain areas in order to work. Usually they'll want you to come into the studio. Remote work is becoming a lot less common, which I think is really unfortunate because I think that was a really cool opportunity for a lot of people. And they want people to go back into the studios. They want to fill up those buildings. So a big con of working in studio animation is you're going to have to move someplace that's really expensive. There are, of course, some people that have gotten the chance to work in studios that don't live in LA, but it is pretty difficult. Another con that we have is definitely, I think it's very competitive and it's difficult to get your foot in the door. I graduated at the start of the pandemic in 2020, which was a great time to graduate. But it took me about 2 years to even get my foot in the door at all. And it was really mostly luck. It's very, very difficult to kind of get into the studio environment. It's not impossible, but it's very competitive. And lastly, I think a big con that we're all sort of aware of is cancellations, layoffs, and overworking. The industry is in a funky area right now. A lot of companies are, getting bought out by other companies and people are losing their jobs. So it is a lot more rocky than it used to be. Alrighty. Let's talk about, on the other hand, let's talk about indie animation. There are a lot of things that were cons in studios, in studio environments that are pros in indie animation. I think that a big pro of indie is there is a lot more creative input and freedom. During my work on Among the Others, which is one of the shows that I mentioned previous, I was able to sit in on the writer's room. So as they started discussing the story and how we would structure these episodes, I was able to give my input from a visual perspective as a storyboarder. And I felt that my input and my experience was really heard in that environment because on a smaller team, your voice is going to be a lot more heard, which was a really encouraging experience for me. Another huge pro, I think, of indie animation is it is almost exclusively remote work. It's going to be a very rare thing for you to find an indie animation studio or like a production house. It is almost exclusively done online, almost exclusively done, honestly, through Discord. I think almost every single project that I've been on has a Discord for organizational purposes. So that's a huge pro. You don't have to live somewhere really expensive in order to start working in indie animation. It's also easier to find entry-level work. So if you're just starting out, if you are a beginner or if you're intermediate and you're struggling to find that entry-level work and that sort of trainee and apprenticeship situation in the studios, which is a lot less common nowadays, you might be able to find something at a smaller indie project that just wants someone to help out a little bit. So it will be a big help for when you're just starting and you're just trying to get into the experience of working on an animation pipeline. I think another pro of indie animation is it allows you to try many things. During my time on Hell of a Boss, I started out as a cleanup animation artist, and then I moved into compositing. And then finally, I finished up as a storyboard artist on their team. It allowed me to explore different sides and different roles in the animation pipeline, which was a really fun experience to get to try things that I might never try in a studio that might keep me in one job. And it's a little difficult to bounce around in a studio environment. Another big pro is there is a worldwide network of artists. So you'll have connections with people from all over the world, from all different experiences, who might be able to recommend you for other projects, or maybe they'll start a project of their own and they worked with you on a different one. There's this huge network of people that are all working together, and it's a really fun experience to get to learn more from other people. And finally, I think that indie has a lot of unique and diverse projects because studios, unfortunately, their focus is money. So they're focused on sequels, they're focused on reboots, they're focused on these things that we've already seen before. It's kind of rare at this point to get these really unique and diverse voices through a story. But with indie animation, you don't have an executive telling you to change it. You don't have someone telling you, oh, no one's going to buy toys of that, because we're not making toys. We're just telling a story. So it has been really creatively fulfilling working in indie animation. On the flip side, let's talk about the cons of indie animation. There is a lot less stability. So if you get a job on an indie project, it might maybe be a couple months maximum. It's not something that is a 9 to 5. You're not going to be having a paycheck unless there's a few indie projects that have an hourly paycheck, but those are very rare. So you're going to be looking at something that is very gig based, so that it might be paying you per page or per second or whatever it ends up being. And it will probably be for a small amount of time. Studios are also becoming very gig based. You might only be working at a studio for a few months, but indie definitely more so is very much, you're not getting a full-time job. It is very much a part-time thing unless you're freelancing for a whole bunch of different projects at once. There is a lot less money involved in indie animation, which means less pay and less budget. The reality is you will get paid less than union minimums when working in indie animation. However, for some people, that's not a problem. For some people who are living in a different area, maybe they're not living in Burbank, California, where it's crazy expensive here. Maybe that less pay is okay for them. After college, I was living in my hometown in upstate New York, which had a very low rent. Like, food was pretty cheap. Everything was a lot cheaper than it is here in California. So I was able to take that less pay without issue. But it depends on your situation, of course. Another con is it can be harder to discern quality projects. My advice for this is you have to prioritize protecting yourself. And what I mean by that is there will be people who are just like, I have this idea and I want to make a show and I want you to storyboard it. But that's when you say, okay, what is your budget? What are the rates? What is the timeline? You have to ask those questions, because unfortunately when I was just starting out, I would just be like, oh, cool, somebody wants me to storyboard. And then I storyboarded for them and I was like, okay, I'm ready to get paid. And then they ghosted me. And there are some people out there that may be looking to take advantage of your work, to take advantage of your skills, just to get something made. And unfortunately, there's really no repercussions. You can make a contract. Are you really going to sue them over $100? Maybe you could. And there's not really any social repercussions. Maybe they'll just nuke their Twitter and disappear. And that can be really hard to find or to discern if someone is very serious about it. And I think a good way to start off is by asking those questions of like, do you have a budget? Do you have a timeline? And if they're serious with those answers, if they know what those answers are, you can figure out for yourself if you feel comfortable with that project. And finally, I think that a big con of indie animation is there are less protections. Again, less protections for payment. So you can't really guarantee that this person is going to pay you. It's really their word and yours, versus a company. If a company doesn't pay you, they can get in really big legal trouble. But if it's a person, it can be a little bit more difficult to enforce that sort of thing. And an unfortunate reality as well is fair treatment. People can overwork you, or they can string you along, or all sorts of things can happen. And when there is no HR and there is no structure and no repercussions, it can be an uncomfortable situation. So make sure that you're finding projects that you feel comfortable with, and projects that are genuine in what they're working on. A question that people ask me is, why should they start working in indie? I think that indie animation is a lot more accessible to people from all over the country. You can live anywhere and you can work from anywhere. It gives you that hands-on experience. It builds up your resume. It builds a network of connections outside of one small industry. There's a lot more in it as well, but I think that ultimately, I think it's up to you. Weigh the pros and cons that I have presented today and see if there's something in it that works for you. And maybe the money is really important to you. Maybe you do live in a high cost area and you're like, I can't really afford to take a job that's, you know, $15 or $20 an hour. And that's totally valid and that's totally okay. Make sure that you're prioritizing what you want to do and your comfort level. And I just think that it is a good potential option if you are not finding work in the union environment, because it's hard out there. It's hard to find these jobs. So it's ultimately up to you. Take everything that I'm giving today with a grain of salt. All right. Okay. Moving on. We're going to talk about finding work in networking, because we could talk about all the work until we're blue in the face, but where do we find it, right? What sort of varieties of indie work do we have? There's a few different things in indie that you will probably find. Something that is a little bit better known are indie animated pilots that are more established. So things like Hell of a Boss, Lackadaisy, which is this picture here on the top, which is a great indie pilot. If you haven't checked it out, I recommend it. It's very well made. These are these big web series that have an established fan base. They're very, very large productions. There's a lot of money behind them, and they're very competitive to get into, but they are pretty organized. I think in my time of the 2 years that I was working on Hell of a Boss, I think there was 150 artists that were working at the time, but after I left, I know they brought on more. So these are hundreds of people that are organized on a team. And really, it kind of almost feels like a big studio production, but it is still indie because there is no studio backing it. They're very competitive to get into, but they're always worth applying to because you never know. And then there's also a subcategory of those indie animated pilots, which I call passion projects, which are, you know, maybe somebody, they go to their 9 to 5, they save up a couple $1,000s and they want to hire someone to storyboard something, and they hire some voice actors. And it's smaller. It's a very compact team, maybe a couple people that they know, but they can be really amazing things to work on. One of my favorite jobs that I ever had was actually the Heroes of Tomorrow, which we saw in a slide a few slides ago. I worked on the Heroes of Tomorrow, and it was one of the best job experience that I had because of how passionate that the team was. So just because something isn't well known or super big or have a lot of money behind it, doesn't mean it's worth just, doesn't mean that you should sort of gloss over it, I suppose. Something that I think is really overlooked is YouTubers. YouTubers technically are also indie animation. So storytime animators like The Odd Ones Out, Illuminations, Jaden Animations, these people who are creating a persona and telling a story. As their channels grow, they need more artists. So that's also worth looking into to see if they're hiring for those sort of YouTube-based projects, which are a little bit less narrative. They're more episodic and one-off of just exploring an anecdote, but they still need artists, and it's worth looking into. Also in YouTubers is best of or like funniest moments animations. I actually just recently did freelance for a funniest moments for a Minecraft channel, which was really fun to just kind of work on something that was goofy. But I got reached out to do some storyboarding, and it was really fun. And so I think looking into YouTube as a space is definitely something to explore and look into. And finally, your own thing. However, with an asterisk, I would say for showcasing your work, don't necessarily go into it for making money because it is very difficult to make money back on indie productions. I put down here something called Fairy Circle, which was an indie project that I had an idea for, but I don't really have the funding for it right now. So instead, I turned it into a storyboard portfolio piece for my portfolio. So you can take the time to explore your own original ideas as a way to share and showcase your work. All right. We talked about what, let's talk about where to find the work. People always ask me, they're like, where do you find these jobs? And honestly, the reality is usually social media. You will find a lot of these jobs on social media because that's how people are promoting themselves and they're promoting their projects. Probably 85% of the indie jobs that I've gotten through Twitter. I'm calling it Twitter. I'm not going to call it X. I'm so sorry. Um,
Hell
uh,
yeah, Eddie. Hell yeah.
I'm just saying, sorry. I've even got the bird on here and everything. Anyways, definitely Twitter. Twitter has been a really great resource, and it's been a way that I've connected with a lot of indie animation people. Also, please use LinkedIn. I know it sucks and nobody likes to use it, and it feels really corporate and stuffy and weird. But I have gotten job interviews through LinkedIn. Recently, I just had a job interview and I asked, hey, how did you find out about me? And he said, I saw you on LinkedIn. So I recommend if you don't have a LinkedIn or if you got to dust it off, just post your storyboards on there. Post what you're up to. Post, a project that you're working on, and use the hashtags of hashtag storyboard or whatever it is that you do. I have seen some indie animated projects. They will post job listings on LinkedIn. Among the others is an indie project that I have been working on. They post their job listings on LinkedIn. So it is a really good resource, even if it is a little bit stuffy to use. And finally, there is also Instagram and Tumblr. I actually got my first indie job through posting a little animation on Tumblr, and they saw it and they reached out to me. I worked for Pencilmation in 2018, and they just emailed me because they're like, oh, we saw your little animation on Tumblr. Do you want to work for us? And I said, sure. I think I have a little bit less experience with Instagram, but I have had some people reach out to me. So social media is a really good tool for you to use if you want to work in indie animation. On the other hand, we also have Discord servers. Discord servers are an amazing resource for connecting with other artists. I'm in a few Discords that are specifically for YouTube animators, some Discords for indie animation in general, or indie animation and then animation in general. Oftentimes, these Discords will have a sub channel specifically for job listings. So maybe they'll follow someone on Twitter who makes a call for artists, and maybe you didn't see that one yet. You can always check those job listings and see if you can find something new to apply for. And finally, there are some other job boards and sites, and animatedjobs.com, other resources. I have seen some indie projects posted on things like Indeed or other, I'm trying to think of another one, but you know what I mean. It is a little bit more rare. I feel like a lot of things are done casually through social media for indie work, but it's always worth checking out and seeing what you can find. All right. We're going to talk a little bit about networking in indie animation. I think that networking in indie animation is fairly similar to just networking in animation in general, or just networking at all. My first advice is to be genuine, be a genuine person and have a genuine interest in the person that you're talking to. I think that a lot of people will know that everybody's looking for a job, everybody's looking for a way to connect to people, but definitely prioritize just getting to know that person and getting to know what they're interested in and what they would like to do as well. I think that will go a really, really long way with networking in general. Indie animation is a very small community. There is a lot of crossover of people working on multiple projects. I had a question recently that I got from somebody from another presentation, which was, do you feel that indie projects are competitive against each other, like trying to keep artists from each other? That has not been my experience at all. More often than not, indie work is pretty part-time. So you can't really tell someone who's working part-time for you, you can't find another job. That's not really how that works. And a lot of people who are working on indie projects are friends with each other, and they will often recommend each other. So, taking multiple indie jobs at a time is fairly common. So I would recommend just to get to know people, just like industry networking, just like networking at all in general, just get to know people, make friends, interact with people in the indie space, have an interest in different projects. I think that is a good place to start. There are no recruiters in indie animation, for better or worse. I think that recruiters are amazing and they do an amazing job. And I could not do that with all the work that they do. It's incredible. However, I think there is a benefit to there being no recruiter, because I have been hiring for indie projects, my own projects and other people's projects before. And recently I was hiring for my film, and someone DM'd me directly and they said, "Hey, I really like your project. If you're ever hiring for this role, let me know, because here's my stuff." And their stuff was really good. And maybe I wasn't hiring for that at the time, but I wrote down their name for later. And that was a direct contact with me, the person who is creating it and the person who's involved with the hiring process. Whereas if there was a recruiter, there would be sort of a middleman between the recruiter and the people actually hiring you for the project. Kind of on that point, find some indie projects that you're interested in and support them. And it never hurts to reach out. There's really no harm in reaching out and saying, "Hey, if you ever need an animator, if you ever need a storyboarder or a character designer, here's my work. I'm interested. I like the project that you have." And worst comes to worst, they say, "Okay, thank you," and they don't reach out. But at least you put your best foot forward and you connected with that person. I would say to apply to things often. There will be people will usually do like a Twitter call for artists. And if you apply under that Twitter call, and maybe that first person won't necessarily hire you, but maybe there will be another indie project that sees you apply for that. And they're like, "Oh, I like this person's art. Let me see what they're up to. They're looking for work." So you might be able to find connections just through posting publicly on social media and reaching out on these job postings. I would recommend to make your contact information very easy to find. Put that in your bio, put your website in your bio somewhere. Just find a way to make it easy for people to connect with you if they are interested in potentially working with you. And finally, I would say check out things like hashtag Indie Animation Day or utilize hashtag Portfolio Day. Both of these are quarterly hashtags that are on Twitter and I believe on Instagram as well. Hashtag Indie Animation Day is a relatively recent hashtag that has been made to have indie animation projects promote themselves. So go through those hashtags and see if you can find something that's interesting to you, and follow those accounts and see if they're ever looking for jobs. That could be a way to connect with these people. And then hashtag Portfolio Day, of course, is a day to share that you are looking for work and the type of work that you're looking for. Okay. On the subject of portfolios, we're going to talk a little bit about portfolios and demo reels.
Eddie, I just want to say really quick
yes.
that you are on a roll, and I
Yes.
think everybody watching is just awash with so much good information, and like
Okay.
this is all like really great.
Okay. Should I slow down?
No, I mean,
Okay.
I am literally just saying that this is all really good, and I think everybody is just blown away by all of the bars that you are dropping right now, because like nobody ever talks about the indie animation space, like period, you know?
Hmm.
So I think that's good. I
Oh,
just wanted
thank
to throw
you.
that in there
Thank
because
you.
I
I
know you've been
appreciate
going, and
that.
I'm like, let me give you a second.
Thank you. Catch my breath, bring it down a little bit. I appreciate that. But yeah, of course, I'm happy to share all this. I can slow down a little bit. I think I'm rolling through it pretty quick. But yeah, I'm excited to share this with people. So let's go into our next segment, which is a little bit about portfolios and demo reels. They are, in my experience, pretty similar to working in the union space. Your portfolio should be pretty simple. Just kind of keep it to the work that you're looking to get into. This is a screenshot of my portfolio. Just as an example, don't my portfolio is not the end all be all of how to build a portfolio, but I just, as a visual example, my homepage is just storyboards. So I would recommend to put what you want to do on your front page. So I don't even want to click on a page to get to your portfolio. Make it as easy as possible for a recruiter or for someone who's hiring for storyboards or whatever it is that you want to do. Put the stuff that you want to do front and center, so we don't even have to click on anything. We can just get right into it and check out what you do. If you want to do multiple things, I think that you can categorize into mini portfolios or subcategories and pages for organization. If someone is looking at your portfolio to hire you for character design, for example, but you have character design, viz dev, and prop design all in one page, it can be kind of hard to sort through all of those images. So subcategories, I think, is a good idea for when you want to do multiple things. Make it easy to navigate, make it easy to read, and find a way to make yourself easy to contact. Easy to navigate. I've got these pages over here on the side, storyboards, animatic, about, resume. I've got all of that pretty clear. You don't have to go searching for the menu or the drop down or anything like that. Easy to read. I just put mine on a white background, and honestly, that's simple enough. You want to showcase your work instead of distract from your work with a lot of design. You can make it pretty, I think. You can have some sort of like personal branding if you have a certain color that you really like, but try to keep it relatively simple because the star of the show is your work. And make yourself easy to contact. So right here on the front page, you don't even have to go to a contact or an about me. My email address is right there. So someone can go to my homepage, look at my storyboards, copy that email address and email me immediately. They don't have to go searching for a way to contact me. Make yourself as easy as possible to hire, because people will be going through hundreds of portfolios for job listings. Even in the indie space, I have done hiring for my project and I've had to go through, I think I went through 250 applications for a concept artist position. So it's a lot. It gets to be a lot. So make your portfolio as easy to navigate as possible. We're going to talk about resume a little bit. This is really small. I know that having this big image can be a little bit difficult to look at, but this is just as a quick reference here. Again, keep it easy to read. Design elements are optional. I heard advice from a recruiter once was see what your portfolio looks like in black and white, because sometimes they will print out your resume to give to someone and it might not always be seen on like a tablet or a computer. So see if your all of your words are clear and visible even in black and white. I would say to put your work experience front and center, and then your software, your skills, your education, things like that. You can add that as well as supplemental, but definitely put your work experience front and center. Also, definitely put in your email and your website. If someone prints off your resume or if someone saves your resume to their computer and they're like, oh, dang, I don't remember where this person's portfolio is, they may refer to your resume to try and find it. And if you don't have that contact information, it can be pretty difficult to find you again. Definitely, as you can tell, I'm just saying, put your email address everywhere. Continuing about resume, I think this is a little more indie specific. Indie experience is still experience, but you can present it in a way that is taken seriously in a professional environment. So as an example, I worked as a storyboard artist among the others, which was an indie project. However, if I sort of downplayed that as it was, oh, it's, it's only an indie project, it's a small thing, it's not a real studio, I'm already kind of priming the person who's hiring me that it's not real work, when it is. You are putting in real work and it's real experience. So for example, here, the third bullet point down, I wrote, worked closely with the scriptwriter and director in the writer's room meetings to provide input on pacing and story beats, which basically means, basically what it was, I went to meetings and I talked about story ideas. I can simplify it that way, but if I sort of not twist it, but put some flowery words on what it is, you can really hype yourself up, which is my second point here. You are doing real work. Maybe it's not for Disney and maybe it's not for DreamWorks, but it is real work and it is real skills that you have. And finding a way to present that in your resume in a professional way, I think is a huge positive. So when I got hired on Harley Quinn, which was my first union studio job, I didn't have a union studio job before that. It was my very first one. My coworker also, it was their first union studio job. We started the same. I actually started at a higher pay rate, and they said that I was more experienced, even though it was both of our first union job. And I do believe that some of that came from my resume and the way that I presented my storyboard experience. And all of my storyboard experience at that time was exclusively indie projects. So the way that you present yourself on your resume is really important. So find a way to sort of hype up the work that you're doing and to be honest about it, but professional. And I think that it is a big positive. And I know that it helped me for sure get that first job. All right. We are rocking and rolling here. I'm going to briefly talk about demo reels. Demo reels are mostly for visual mediums, animation, compositing, animatic editing. You don't really need a demo reel for anything like character design or even storyboarding. I have seen some people do that. It's really not necessary. I would recommend to put your contact info in the reel for the same reason as before. Just put your email everywhere. Make yourself easy to contact. So for example, this is a screenshot of my compositing reel. I posted it on Vimeo, but if someone stumbles across it on Vimeo and not on my portfolio, they might not have my email address easily accessible. So just putting that in the video itself is always a good idea. Excuse me. Put your best work first and quality over quantity. Prioritize the things that you're the most proud of, and don't necessarily pad out your demo reel super, super long just for the sake of it. If you have 3 shots that are super good and 3 shots that are okay, just put in those 3 shots that are super good and work on making some more things that you can update your portfolio with. Student projects are okay if that's all that you have, but put in some work to replace them. It can be a little jarring for someone to have this really awesome character animation at the beginning of their demo reel, and you're like, oh, wow, they're really good. And then a couple shots later, they have a bouncing ball animation that they did in class. It's fine. It shows that you know how to animate, but work on replacing those eventually because it will make you seem a little bit more professional. But Eddie, you might say, what about character design and prop design and viz dev and writing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? I don't really know a whole lot about that because I'm not a character designer or prop designer or a viz dev person or a writer. I don't have a lot of experience building those sort of portfolios, and there's a lot of people out there with better advice than I have. And there's a lot of resources on how to build your portfolio. So do some research and see what other people have been doing and see what other portfolios look like and try to take some inspiration from those.
You know what, Eddie? I think maybe though, as a indie director, you could
Mhm.
probably speak to like what you look for when
True.
you were hiring for Circus of Wishes.
That's very true. Yeah. So I did actually hire for a character turnaround position and a viz dev position when I was working on my project. And I think something that I looked for a lot was for character design was definitely technical ability. So the ability to show volume in three-dimensional space and turnarounds and expression sheets and all of those things, and showcasing that you could make a design that was really strong, but you also knew how to turn that in space was something that unfortunately there were a lot of character design portfolios that didn't showcase that. So I would often pass over people, even if they were really good artists. I would have to look for someone else because I needed someone with the technical ability for a turnaround. And for viz dev, something that I looked for a lot was an understanding of color and an understanding of cohesive color. I think that I saw a lot of viz dev that got, excuse me, it got a little muddy or a little overcomplicated at times. I think that making something that stands out and is unique and creative is great, but also having something that is more applicable to a lot of different shows. So a lot of shows will usually have a bedroom, or maybe there'll be a living room or a kitchen. Finding a way to design those in an interesting way, but it is also technically strong, I think is a really good thing for viz dev portfolios. So that's usually what I was looking for. Admittedly, I am a little bit less experienced in those sort of portfolios. But for me, that's usually what I was looking for when I was hiring for those positions.
Did you look for anyone to help you write, or did
Oh,
you
that's
do
right.
your film script all on your own? I can't recall.
I did get help from a writer. It was something where I hired too early. So that was something that I learned from was I was excited about the project and I was like, oh, I want to make this film. And I hired someone to write it, but I didn't have the idea yet. So eventually we did end up sort of parting our ways while I like rebooted myself and was like, okay, what am I actually making? But when I was doing hiring for writing, something that I was looking for, I really was looking for someone who had a um, strong character voices. So if I'm reading a script and all of the characters kind of sounded the same, that was something that I would usually pass on. And something that really stuck out to me was people who could write dialogue and you could kind of hear them in your head and you could hear the way that they speak differently. So that was something that I definitely looked for. Um, but yeah, definitely if you are interested in making your own project, make sure that you know what you're talking about before you hire people, because that I think was something that I stumbled on early on in production of my film was um, I put someone in a situation where I was like, I have an idea, but I don't really know what I want you to do yet. So make sure that you know exactly what you're hiring people for if you want to get into directing and creating your own project. So that's my advice on those. Thank you, Bree. Though that's a really good observation and a good question.
Of course.
Thank you. Okay, staying hydrated. All right, we're almost done here. I briefly want to talk about the state of indie animation. And by that, I mean indie animation is changing a lot. In the past, indie animation really used to be two things. It was traditional 2D, paper animation films that would be submitted to film festivals. or a little bit later, it would be Newgrounds and YouTube parody animators that would work in Flash. In my opinion, I think that Bitey of Brackenwood was one of the first viral original indie projects. If you don't know what that is, that's okay. It's from almost 20 years ago, I realized, which makes me feel very old. Um, it was made by one guy with no financial backing and no financial return, and he just animated it himself because he wanted to tell a story. Um, and he posted it on Newgrounds and he posted it on YouTube, and that was pre-YouTube monetization. So YouTube monetization, I believe, was in 2007. So he had no way of making anything back on this project. He just did it out of his own passion. And it was very good. It inspired me a lot when I was younger. But definitely that was kind of one of the first original projects that caught a lot of people's attention at the time. There was really no money in it beyond maybe if you won something at a film festival. There was really no way, no structure for funding for indie animation in the past. Whereas nowadays, in the present, I think that people take indie a lot more seriously, especially over the past 5 years. People are really hungry for original stories. People are looking for these original projects to support. Things like Hell of a Boss, Lackadaisy, Glitch Productions, which did the Amazing Digital Circus, which came out a couple days ago, even. Was it last week? I don't remember. Very recently. If you haven't checked it out, I recommend that you do. These are big teams of people. These are businesses, and these have millions of dollars wrapped up in these projects, which is very, very different from the past where there was no money in it at all. There's a lot of eyes on it right now because of the money. There's a lot of people who are even outside of the animation niche that are like, oh, hang on, Lackadaisy raised over $1 million. Interesting. Maybe I want in on that. So there's a lot of people that are interested to see where this goes.
And they raised all that in like less than a week, right? Or is it just less than a month?
It was less than a month, I think. I think it was like a month, maybe. It was a pretty short for like over $1 million. Crazy. It was a lot. And it was pretty unheard of, especially for like an indie production for animation. I believe that Lackadaisy was the second biggest animation crowdfund ever, and I think the biggest was the Critical Role crowdfund.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I think the Critical Role one was the one that like got it immediately.
Yeah.
Like they got gangbusters money.
Oh yeah, they got money.
They got money.
But I believe that Lackadaisy was the second highest, which is crazy. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of like people involved. And even outside of those super big productions, there's things like funding through Kickstarters, funding through merchandising, funding through YouTube ad revenue. And more funding means more teams, like more working people on your team, which often leads to better quality. So it has changed a lot from the past. And finally, the future, nobody really knows for sure. Some people think that it is financially unsustainable because there is no big funding backing, and it's very difficult to make that money back after, because if you release it on YouTube, a streaming service hasn't bought it, and people don't have to buy it. They watch it for free on YouTube. So you could maybe get ad revenue off of it, but how much ad revenue are you going to make if you don't have a super big following already? So there's a lot of business questions that have some people a little bit concerned about the future of indie animation. My 2 cents. Take all this with a grain of salt. This is just me and my opinion. Not everyone can go viral and bring in the Lackadaisy money, but anyone can make an indie project. You don't have to make an indie project to make money off of it or to even be popular or anything like that. You can just do it out of passion, and like that's all that you really need. Excuse me. But it is unlikely that you will bring in that level of lackadaisy and hell of a boss merchandising money. I think that there will be more attempts to ride the wave, which means there will be more successes and more failures. I believe that we are in a wave of indie where a lot of attention is on it. And I think there will be more projects that will be looking for people to hire and will be looking to grow their teams, which I think is a positive for people who are looking for work in this niche. And I do think it is a niche. I think it is pretty small because for us, people who are artists and for people who want to work in art, we're keeping an eye on it. We're interested in it. But if I went and talked to my sister, for example, who's not a very artistic like animation person, and I'm like, oh, did you watch Lackadaisy? She's gonna be like, what are you talking about? So I think that it is still fairly small because it is often sort of word of mouth of how people are finding out about it. I'm curious to see what happens and how it changes. But definitely nobody really knows where we're going, but I'm excited to see more projects and, more artists get involved in it. And that brings us to the end of my presentation. Thank you for listening to me talk for so long.
Ooh, all right.
But yeah, I'm ready for any questions that people might have. I'm sorry, I got a tickle in my throat here, but
Hydrate. Oh, and Eddie, I guess so people can see us bigger. You can,
yes.
you don't have to share.
Okay, I will stop sharing now. Okay.
Yeah.
All
Well,
right.
that was amazing. Honestly, I learned a lot too that I didn't know. Just about like the process for like how people handle, their indie productions and whatnot. Because I mean, like, I'm currently working on it. I've worked on 2 indie productions myself. I helped out as a storyboard revisionist on the Sunflower Club's Antipasto, just a very small short. It's very cute. And I'm currently a storyboard artist for Tunerific Tariq's Hey, which you put up on the slide
Yes.
earlier in the presentation, and it's been really fun. But like, just sort of like the deep process for how you as a director, like that was stuff that I never really thought about, like what you consider when you're looking for people, or how to even go about and like finding these niche places to find work, beyond just like Twitter, because like
Right.
that's mainly where I've seen stuff. I've just seen it on Twitter, but like I never really thought to like, oh, I should probably seek out like individual like Discord groups and whatnot, like, and stuff like
Yeah.
that. So
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I found sorry.
oh no, you go ahead.
I was just gonna say I found a lot of connections through Discord. I've connected with a lot of new people through just being in communal Discords and chatting with people. So I definitely think it's a good resource to check out.
100%. And for the B&A Discord, for those of you that are in there, we also a lot of people tend to post their indie projects in the job posting board, or if they're volunteer, they post them in the volunteer channel. Like, I'm sure you've seen Defenders of Elodia posting things, or Limelight, they've posted some stuff as well, just like kind of dropping some names of some other like individuals stuff that exists out there. And yeah, I don't know, I'm just very blown away by like all the stuff you shared, Eddie. Like, thank you so much.
Yeah, of course.
Because it's so important, I think, especially like it's just already so hard to break into the animation industry, where I think a lot of folks who are trying to break in get sort of caught up in the idea that like, oh, if I don't get that first big break at a major studio, I'm never going to get anywhere.
Yeah.
And you speaking on the fact that you got your job at Warner Brothers from your experience working in the indie space, I think that's really important to showcase that there are other avenues to work on your creative portfolio beyond just doing portfolio stuff by yourself, but like you can seek out these projects in order to get that experience. Hopefully it's paid. If you have the capacity to do volunteer work, I guess that's your prerogative. I personally would advocate for making sure you get in a paid project personally.
Yeah, no,
But
I agree.
to each their own, and yeah, nobody ever really talks about indie as an avenue.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we all know that the animation industry is in a rocky area right now.
Right.
And I rolled off of my work at Warner Brothers, and because I had made these connections in indie, I have been working freelance ever since because I have connected with this many people and I have had work to do. Whereas some of my friends that worked exclusively in the union environment really struggled to find work or like freelance or stuff to get them through until they found their next job because they hadn't built those skills to network in an environment that was not the,
Hmm.
you know, union studio space. So I think it is just a really positive thing if you have the bandwidth. Of course it takes a lot of work to network with another entire group of people, but I benefited a lot from it for sure.
Hmm. Absolutely. Um, being in tune to some of the indie space, at least on Twitter and whatnot, helped me get through a little bit of this current drought in the industry myself as well.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
it's rough out there, folks.
It's rough.
I'm gonna keep it real with you. Like Eddie and I will keep it
Hmm.
real. The industry is kind of a mess right now, but
Hmm.
we'll make it through. But let's get to the Q&A because you guys have asked some pretty good questions, and we'll go to maybe about 5:30. Is that
Yeah,
okay with you, Eddie?
I have nowhere to be. Yep.
All right. Let's see. Um, Brianna Gregory asked, "Hey, a fellow Brianna, how long were you working on studio projects as a freelancer before the contract ended? And does getting work become easier for you when you have big names on your resume, like you working at WB and Hell of a Boss?" So kind of like a
Mm.
two-parter there.
Hmm. So can you read the first part of that to me again? I'm sorry.
Of course. How long were you working on studio projects as a freelancer before the contract ended? I guess like kind of asking like how long, like what's your full like time for working on a studio project before
Yeah.
the contract is up?
So for indie projects, that varies a lot. I think the longest one that I worked on was Hell of a Boss, which was 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I left of my own accord because I got a full-time job. So I could have been working for longer. But most of my experience is um, a couple months, or it is a little bit of work spread over a long period of time because of funding. So if someone goes to their 9 to 5 and they're like, I can pay you, you know, XYZ this month, and you do a little bit every month, that's a little bit different. Um, but my time, excuse me, my time at Warner Brothers was just over a year. So I worked at Warner Brothers for a little bit over a year, working as a revisionist. I was on Harley, and then I moved over to Kite Man.
And the second part of that was, I guess, just having big names in your resume help with like continuing to get work.
Um, I feel like I would.
I think it doesn't, to be
I
honest.
feel like I. Yeah, I think that honestly, I don't know how many people knew what Hell of a Boss was when I was applying to, let's say, when I was going from indie into union positions. I was able to say, hey, I worked for 2 years at a production and I knew how the animation pipeline worked. That seemed more important than the name. Um, I think that after working on Harley, I might not be able to answer this super accurately because I think we're in sort of a hiring drought right now.
Yeah.
But I do think more of it is from the work that you showcase and the experience in a project, like an animation project, rather than the name. From my experience, I don't really know if a big name got me more work in the indie space. It was definitely more so people would reach out to me because um, they liked, you know, my boards had sort of like a cinematic feel, or it was dramatic and they liked the drama that I had in it. It was less so of like, I reached out to you because you worked on Hell of a Boss. I didn't really have that experience.
I would kind of agree, and I can probably speak more to like the 9 to 5 studio space a little bit
Hmm.
because a chunk of you already know that like I was a production coordinator on Proud Family Ladder and Prouder for the first 2 seasons, but I didn't like get that job because I worked on a Disney Junior show beforehand. I got that job because of me networking with people over at Disney and letting them know that I wanted to, make a transition over. Or I when I transitioned over to being a storyboard revisionist finally, and I got to do some freelance on Jessica's Big Little World. I didn't get that Jessica's Big Little World job as a revisionist because I was on Proud Family. It honestly wouldn't have really mattered because Proud Family was production coordinator work. Jessica was storyboard work.
Hmm.
The Jessica thing came from people knowing that I wanted to become a revisionist and advocating for myself. So it's sort of like your work and networking speaks more volumes than, as Eddie mentioned, oh my God, you worked at Disney. That a lot. So what? A lot of people work at Disney. It
Right.
doesn't really matter.
Hmm.
It's all
Yeah,
about like,
absolutely.
does your work fit the vibe for the thing coming up, and do people know who you are, and are you not a jerk? Are you cool to work with?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Let's see. Moving on up to the east side. um, let's see. All right. How what spectrum of pipeline jobs are available in the indie space? Mariama asks. Like, I guess like what kind of jobs are available in the indie space?
Oh, I would say
A lot,
most,
right? Like it
yeah.
almost kind of like is 1 to 1 first. Well, not all the time, but
Hmm. It depends on the project. It depends on the scope of the project. A lot of smaller projects may not hire um writers, even though I think they should. I think that I feel if more creators hired writers, some of the projects would be better, personally. But I think that there's less writers that are hired, and I think there's less production people that are hired. I think more often than not, the production side of things is being done by the creator, um, which is a thing, which often
probably
leads
not the
to a lot
best
more
thing.
it leads to a lot more disorganization for sure. But that is to say, there are some production positions. I know that at Hell of a Boss, there was a production manager. I believe that Lackadaisy has a production manager. So these bigger productions definitely will have production people. I think that for smaller projects, you are more likely to find them looking for storyboarding and maybe background and animation. I think that's usually where more of the smaller projects are finding. But honestly, people are hiring for a lot of different things in the indie space. Um,
Do you see people hiring for directors? I see someone asking that because I see a couple of people asking, like, do they hire for
yeah.
like, how does this relate to writers? How does this relate to this position? And you kind of
Hmm.
covered it a little bit in just that one.
Yeah, I think that an unfortunate reality is that the people who are the ideas guy and they're like, I have my OCs that I want to make a show out of, they will take on the writing and the directing and the creating, which I think sometimes can be a negative, um, because you are not working with other people to help bring that project to life with a new set of eyes. I think it is a little bit more rare to find directing or writing positions in the indie space, because more often than not, it is one person that is like, hey, um, I want to make this thing. And this is me speaking as a creator slash director of my film because I wasn't really going to hire a director if I wanted to do it myself and I knew what I wanted. So in my experience, I don't believe I've seen an indie production hiring a director. I think that's pretty rare.
Mhm.
Writers sometimes is a little bit less
I've
common,
Yeah, I've
but
seen a couple of indie productions
a
say like
few.
we're looking for writers, but it's been a very small amount.
Yeah, yeah.
Let's see. Da, 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 da. How what soft skills are best for working in indie animation? Hmm.
Ooh, good question. Um, communication. Making sure that you can communicate clearly, especially because so much of indie is done online. So I think that it's never a bad idea to honestly over explain yourself, because I think if you're reading something over text versus talking to someone in person, sometimes things can get lost in translation. So making sure that you can keep up with working in a fully remote position and communicating with a team, I think is a really good thing. Also, time management. I think that because there is not that 9 to 5 structure, you have to self-manage yourself, and you have to hit your deadlines and make your own calendar, and keep up with, if you juggle a lot of different projects, which I have done a few times in my life. I'll be doing 4 projects at once. You have to time manage yourself, because if you don't hit those deadlines, who's going to hit them? You have to be able to sort of self-delegate and find when you do those projects for yourself. I think that those are probably my 2 biggest advices, is communicating, and even communicating if you need more time, because more often than not, I feel like indie is pretty flexible and open with timelines. So if you get to a point where you get overwhelmed and you communicate with your director earlier rather than later, hey, I got school going on, or I have my full-time job that got really stressful this week. If you say, this has happened to me on my project, I had some people that were like, hey, I'm moving, I can't really work on this right now. And if you just let me know, cool, no problem. We got no issues. But there was an instance where someone fell off the face of the earth, and I was like, it's okay if stuff's going on, I just don't know if you're alive. Like, so being able to communicate with your director, I think, is a really good thing, especially if you're working on remote projects, like I said.
Mm. A couple of people have asked this in various ways, but do
Mhm.
you have any recommendations? Like you brought up, like, finding community and finding discords, but do you have any specific recommendations on discords that people can go to do that networking for indie stuff?
Ooh, good question. Off the top of my head, a oh, the Sunflower Club has a fan server,
Mm.
which has a lot of indie people and people who want to work in indie. I know that Creator Nation also has an indie Discord server. I'm not in that one. I joined it, but then I had too many Discord servers, so I had to, prune my Discord servers a little bit. I know that that's a good resource. There's another one, I'm trying to remember what it's called. There was another one that was specifically YouTube, um, for YouTube animators.
Yeah,
Sorry
you
that I,
mentioned that a little bit in your
yeah.
presentation.
Um, oh, it's called BTV. This is really long. BTV Media's freelance server. It's specifically done. I think it was set up by an agent. He's a guy who works with a lot of different animation YouTube channels,
Mm.
and he started organizing a public Discord for people who wanted to work in YouTube animation. I believe that it's he posted it publicly, so it should still have a way to join. Let me see if I can.
You find the direct link.
Let me see if I can find the guy. Give me just a moment. I'm so sorry.
I've also like
Um,
written these in the chat, or typed these
Great.
in the
Thank you
chat
so
too for
much.
guys. So you can like
Um,
drop them in Google and take a look.
oh yes. Okay. So his name. Oh wait, should I put this in the chat? Hold
Yeah,
on.
if you should have the capability to do so.
Yes. Um,
While you do that, someone asked the question, do you have any advice for becoming a PA, especially for someone from outside the animation industry? My advice to you, as someone who was a production assistant for a while and was in production management for like 4 years before becoming an artist, make any job that you have can translate over into production management. It's all about utilizing power words and making sure that you showcase, like, you coordinated, you organized, you managed, you kept to a schedule. Like, use those kinds of phrases in your resume. Also, if at all possible, perhaps you could work like a temp office job, and that can also sort of like help with showcasing that you're able to work a type of production managerial job. I know people who didn't do that period and have gotten PA jobs. Like, I didn't do that at all, and I got a PA job. My experience came from working in graphic design for a year and a half. But because I was in an office environment and because I did podcasting for BNA, that's why I got hired as a PA. So I kind of took that experience, even though it was not related to animation in the slightest. I like twisted it and was like, I kept schedule, met with people on time, replied to emails, did these things. These are all things you do as a PA. So make sure you cater your resume to doing that, if that helps. And it looks like Discord servers have been posted in the chat.
Yes. I posted I was looking for the tweet that Nate had posted, which has like a little bit of additional information about what it is specifically.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Let's see. We have time for probably two more. Let me look here at the list. I guess this is a pretty simple one. Someone is asking, what do you think about the website Behance as a portfolio thing?
Oh,
It's like a host for your portfolio.
I have not used it personally. Something that I will say is I don't think it really matters what website that you use as long as you have a place to showcase your work, and it's organized. I've had some people who applied, they had a Tumblr blog, and that's free, and they can just share their Tumblr blog and they can keep it organized with tags and things like that. I don't think that you have to spend a lot of money or be super particular with how you build your website. I think it can sometimes come across as a little bit more professional, but really what it's for is to showcase your artwork rather than your website building skills, if that makes sense. But I personally don't have experience with that website.
Let's see. I guess this is kind of a good one to probably go out on. What would you advise for those who want to be an independent creative? What would you advise for people who want to like get into to be like an independent director or like leader for their own like animated project? Like, what kind of advice would you give? You kind of already did, but is there anything like more in depth that you wish you would have known before you started?
Yeah, absolutely. So the project that I'm working on now is it's basically going to be feature length. It's going to be like a 40-minute film. I should not have done that. I shouldn't have done that. So it's very much do as I say, not as I do sort of thing. I would recommend starting small. If you have an idea for this huge web series that's going to be 3 seasons long and you want to tell this really big story, that's great. That's amazing. Can you afford to do that? Do you have the time to do that? Do you have the skills and the resources and the team to do that? Or do you have enough people and enough money and enough time to do a 1-minute short? Maybe you can do a scene for that idea that you're really, really excited about. It doesn't have to be the next Hell of a Boss. It doesn't have to be the next Lackadaisy. I would definitely evaluate your scope and what you are able to do at this time. I also implore people to make a budget. Please make a budget, because animation is more expensive than you think it is, especially if you want to pay people fairly. So if you make that budget, it is very sobering of like, oh, dang, this costs a lot of money. So what can I do instead? What can I adjust? Maybe I'll make an animatic. Maybe the animatic is enough. Maybe all I have to do is, I'll hire some voice actors and I'll do the storyboarding myself. That's a couple $100s for voice actors.
I second the animatic thing. You don't have to be the next Hell of a Boss at all. You don't have to be animating sick compositing stuff. If you want to do that animatic, go ahead and do that.
Absolutely. Yeah, because you can still tell your story and you can still create something. It is still indie. It is still indie animation. And I think that unfortunately, because of these gigantic projects, people tend to be really hard on smaller creators who are just making an animatic and just doing their own thing. Um, just do something that you're excited about. But definitely take a look at the scope and what you're able to do without stretching yourself too thin. Like I perhaps might be doing, but we'll talk about that another time.
Well, you did say, do as I say, don't do as I do.
Yep, very much.
All right. Well, oh, actually we have 5 more minutes.
Yeah, we have time. Yeah.
Geez. You know what?
Mhm.
Eddie, what
Yes.
are some indie animated projects that you are excited about? You had a
Ooh.
slide, and maybe you could talk a little bit about those.
Yeah. Do you want me to pull up that slide or do you want me
Yeah,
to?
you can pull up
Yeah.
that slide.
Let me see. Let me get myself situated. Um, I moved all my windows around. All right, hold on. Here we go. Go back to the beginning. Okay. There we go. And then full screen. And then share my screen. Over here. Share. Okay.
Woo!
We're back. Yeah, so these were just a few that I'm kind of excited about. Some of these are made by friends of mine. Um, Farfetched is currently in production, and it's sort of like a creepy supernatural sort of um, early 2000s vibes project, which is very fun. They're also doing their own original music that sounds a lot like early 2000s emo music, which is really, really fun. It's all in world. I'm very excited to see what they're working on. Amazing Digital Circus came out very recently by Glitch Productions. Glitch Productions also works on an indie project called Murder Drones. But the Amazing Digital Circus is phenomenal. It's beautiful. It's really, really well made. So I recommend that people check those out. I had a lot of fun watching it. Um, the Heroes of Tomorrow, Thought, as we call it, was actually a project that I worked on. And I'm friends with the creator, and it's a sci-fi horror comedy combo. And it's a lot of fun, and I really, really like the world that's being built. There's like some fun aliens and robots and like murder mystery. It's very, very fun. Hey, I'm also very excited about. That's the one that you're working on, Bree. And that is kind of more of a, I don't want to say sitcom, but it's a little bit,
Well, it is. He would call
yeah,
it a sitcom, a
sitcom.
adult animated sitcom about two
Yeah,
people that really love each other.
which I think is so sweet. And the idea of you're not making something that's this high octane sci-fi thing. It's just about two people that care about each other and talking about relationships and, communication in those relationships. What I've seen of this project is really sweet and really exciting. And that's what I'm the most excited about with indie animation is this idea that people can tell any story. It doesn't have to be um like this big massive like epic tale. It can just be, I want to talk about these two people and I want to explore what relationships mean, and I'm very excited for Hey. um and then lastly over here on the right hand side is Lumi and the Great Big Galaxy. That's also being made by a friend of mine. That's very much it's about this little star and his alien friends, and they go on adventures. I think the art and the colors of this are so pretty, and I love the style and the design of it. There are so many amazing indie projects out there if you just poke around and see if you can find some that you're interested in. Really, genuinely, anything that you're into, if you're into sci-fi, if you're into fantasy, if you're, anything at all, you can find that in the indie animation community. And you can always find something that someone's working on that might be something that you really connect with and something that you really like. So that's my little spiel on why you should go find a cool indie show to watch.
Heck yeah. And I guess that pretty much, yeah, we're at 5:30 and that
Mhm.
wraps up our presentation for today. Eddie, where can people find you and your social media and your project?
Oh, yes. Give me just a moment and I can scroll down here. Thank you. Thank you guys for coming. Um, Feel free to reach out if you have any questions after the fact. My email is edmeadart@gmail, or you can find my stuff at edmeadart.com. I am happy to chat with you if you have any additional questions after the fact. You can find me at, again, edmeadart, Twitter and Instagram and things like that. And my project is called Circus of Wishes. And it is at Circus of Wishes on Twitter and Instagram. And I post updates for my film every Wednesday. So if you're curious what I'm up to, I have some animatic clips and some animation that we've posted so far. And I'm very excited to share more of it soon. So yeah, that's where you can find me. Bree and Sammy and everyone, thank you so much for having me. It's been so much fun to get to talk, about something that I'm really, really passionate about. And I hope that what I've shared today has been helpful for people.
Of course. Thank you, Eddie. You did an amazing job. I'm sure that everyone has got so much good knowledge just about learning about the indie animation space. And I'm pretty sure we're probably going to see a bunch more indie animated projects popping up because I know this inspired the heck out of me. So I'm sure a lot of the people watching are probably inspired to just, keep going and like doing their own thing now too.
Absolutely. I'm excited to see them. I want to see what everybody's up to and what people can make. There's so many creative people out there, and I want to see all the things that people can come up with.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much, and you all have a good evening. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thank you for coming.